Seymour calls this a beneficiary blowout. Why is that?
Oh, look, you got a permanent increase in expenditure on job seeker and emergency benefits. Pre-COVID, it was $1.8 billion a year. Post-COVID, every year it's $3.8 billion on benefits. Now, that's assuming that unemployment stays low, and I think the assumptions in this budget, 4.4% unemployment and 4.4% economic growth in 2023. You look at what this government is doing to business, strangling the supply of skills through immigration, fair pay agreements, extra costs, minimum wage increases, extra holidays, extra sick leave, all the bureaucracy and tax being put on to go to business. I think those economic assumptions are heroic, and actually it's going to cost a lot more for benefits because there'll be more people on them.
They're from Treasury though, they're not the government's prediction.
Yeah, well, just remember, I mean, all of these Treasury forecasts are completely different from the ones we had last year. And you say, oh, well, it was an uncertain environment because of COVID. It's an uncertain environment now. I don't think that these interest rates can remain where they are, and the debt that's been taken on, $100 billion, $100,000 per household in debt. That's what's being taken on, and with facing that with the current interest rates, okay, manageable. But does anyone truly believe that it's sustainable to have an OCR of 0.25? Increasingly, the bank economists don't. Meanwhile, middle New Zealand seeing a whole lot of inflation in the prices they pay. That inevitably leads to interest rate increases, which is a further squeeze. And do you think there's anything in this budget for people whose primary way of getting money is actually working? You know the answer to that. All of the expenditure is actually handouts, such as those welfare increases. Now, let me just...
Would you not increase benefits $250 a week on average for someone to live off? It's too low, isn't it?
It may be low, but it's low because they haven't addressed other issues of cost, particularly housing. And once again, you're not seeing the level of first principles transformation to infrastructure funding, planning and building consenting that's actually required to fix the problem.
Building consent is actually the highest this month. It has been for years.
Yeah, for years. It's finally got to where it was in 1974 when there were 3 million people here and we didn't have a housing crisis. So, the idea that the government's fixed housing, I'm sorry, they haven't. And that's what's driving the costs. The idea that you just hose out money. Remember, housing costs are also high for people who work, and the net effect of this is that there are going to be more people on benefits, more people work shy than there were before, and you talk to employers, they need skills, they need people to actually do jobs. They're already finding it's almost impossible. This government's turning the tap off on skills from immigration, and there's no serious attempt to address issues in education either. So look,
they have opened it up to free apprenticeships, and they are trying to upskill.
Yeah, I mean, that's not new. I mean, apprenticeships have existed for at least as long as there have been trades. What I'm talking about is how do we do things like charter schools where we actually let new people with new ideas operate schools with real accountability. At the moment, kids don't go to school, and there's actually no disincentive for a school with a low attendance record. That's not the way you run an education system. Anyway, we could talk about that, but there's a number of underlying issues to do with productivity, skills in education, infrastructure and home building that are going to be with us after this COVID period. Instead of using the opportunity to transform in those areas, we've basically taken on another $100,000 a household in debt, and those people who rely on actually working to get their money, there's absolutely no relief, just rising costs and prices. And that's what they should have done, is cut taxes.
Criticism seems to rest on this assumption that their own assumptions or Treasury's own assumptions are faulty, though. But if they stand up, then we'll be good.
Even if you take Treasury's assumptions at face value, and I think they're heroic. Does anyone really think the New Zealand economy is going to grow at 4.4% given what this government's doing to business? I don't think so. But let's assume that Treasury have got it right for once. I don't think they've ever had a forecast that was correct before, but let's say this is the first time. Then, do we really think that putting on $100 billion of extra debt onto the next generation is the right thing to do? Do we really think it's right to spend $486 million restructuring the healthcare system? And in every other sector, restructuring is about saving money. Only in government do we spend more than twice as much on a restructure as we give to Pharmac. And wasn't that a disgrace? They wouldn't put funding in the Pharmac review. That's what a mature government would have done. Instead, we have
their election promise, $200 million for Pharmac. Is there anything good in this budget that you think?
We got to wait a few more sleeps, as Grant Robertson says, to find out if our medicines are going to be funded. because the government couldn't put Farm Act and medicine funding into the Farm Act review and do it a proper, systematic, mature way. So I think that is actually probably the most disgraceful thing. But in terms of is there anything good in there, look, I've only had a few hours. I'm an optimistic, I'm a positive person.
Nothing so far
searching,
then.
But so far, all we're seeing is taking the good conditions New Zealand has for granted, banking those in, borrowing money, and handing out cash, and deciding to have a train factory in Dunedin like it's the 70s again.
Thanks for your time, David.